I'm Nate, 27 years old, and if you'd asked me 2 years ago what I thought rock bottom looked like, I'd probably have said something dumb like being broke or getting dumped. Turns out, it's sitting on the edge of a cot in a holding cell, trying to make a collect call to your parents, only to be told they can't talk because they're at your sister's gender reveal party. I remember every detail. The cold of the steel bench pressing into my back, the sour stench of old sweat and bleach, the way the payphone crackled as my mom answered with laughter in her voice. "Nathan? What is it?" I was relieved for a moment, like maybe someone finally picked up. But then she followed it up with, "We're at Chloe's gender reveal. This isn't really a good time. You'll figure it out, won't you?" Then a click. "No, are you okay?" "No, what happened?" Just click. I stood there, the dial tone humming in my ear, hands clenched so tight my knuckles went white. I had one more phone call. So I called the only person left who actually gave a damn, my lawyer, David Kessler. Not a public defender, a real one, the kind that costs too much and doesn't waste time. He picked up after 2 rings and said, "Tell me where you are. I'm on my way." That man moved faster than anyone I'd ever known. Within 3 hours, I was out on bail. He even drove me home. No one else showed. Not even a text from my parents. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why were you in jail, Nate? Well, it wasn't drugs or theft or anything like that. It was assault, but the kind where you're not sorry you did it. A guy named Vince laid hands on someone I care about. I found out. I confronted him. He got violent first. I finished it. The cops arrived after a neighbor called it in. Vince had a broken nose and a bruised ego, and I had handcuffs around my wrists. Still, the fact that no one from my family even bothered to check what had happened, just went on popping confetti over Chloe's unborn baby while I sat in a holding cell, was something I couldn't forget or forgive. Growing up, Chloe was always the favorite. I used to think I was just imagining it, but by the time I hit high school, even my teachers would comment on how differently we were treated. She got a brand new car at 16. I got a shared beat-up Honda Civic with a leaky roof. Her room stayed pristine, repainted and redecorated every couple of years like some Pinterest showroom. Mine still had glow-in-the-dark stars from when I was 10. Every time she messed up, it was someone else's fault. Me? 1C on a report card, and I was a disappointment to the family legacy. It wasn't just material stuff. It was attention, affection, support. Chloe wanted to be a lifestyle influencer, so our parents bankrolled her ring light setups, her travel content trips, her endless skincare routines. I worked 2 jobs during college and still barely got a "that's nice" when I graduated. But this jail call, that was a new low, and it made something inside me snap. Not in a rage kind of way. More like a slow, icy realization. They had never really seen me. And I had spent my entire life trying to earn the approval of people who only clapped when Chloe sneezed. So I stopped reaching out. For a week, I didn't call, text, or show up to anything. And sure enough, no one reached out to me either. Except David. He invited me to dinner with his family. Just burgers in his backyard, nothing fancy. But it was the first time in a while I felt seen. Heard. Human. That week turned into 2, then 3. Still nothing. Chloe posted videos of the gender reveal party all over Instagram. There were pink balloons and a smoke cannon, and of course, a custom cake. She captioned it, "It's a girl. Can't wait to welcome my little princess into this amazing family." 2 heart sparkles. I stared at it, sitting on my bed, in my 1-bedroom apartment that I paid for by fixing HVAC units. It was like watching a performance, a stage I'd never been invited onto. But then something weird happened. My parents finally called. It was a Thursday morning, and I was in the middle of writing a statement with David for my upcoming court date. My phone buzzed, and when I saw Mom flash across the screen, I hesitated before answering. "Nathan, honey." Her voice was chipper, too chipper. "We heard you got into some kind of situation." She said it like I'd spilled juice on a white rug. "We wanted to come visit. Your father and I. We're free Saturday. Is that all right?" For a moment, I didn't answer. I could hear my dad in the background, muttering something about traffic on the interstate. "Sure," I said, tone flat. "Come by the county courthouse. I'll be there signing some papers with David." There was a pause. I almost laughed. "Oh," Mom said. "Well, okay then. We'll see you there, sweetheart." They showed up in matching sweaters and bright smiles, like it was a church bake sale. Mom even brought a Tupperware of cookies. I saw them through the glass door in the lobby, trying to act casual while glancing around for me. But I wasn't in the waiting area. I was upstairs, standing beside David, who handed me a sealed envelope and said, "This will do it." "Are you sure?" I nodded. My hands trembled, but not from nerves. From finally knowing I had the leverage to end the game they'd been playing for years. And this time, I was holding the board. When the guard downstairs waved them through, I watched from the landing as they stepped inside, smiles still glued to their faces. That's when the guard handed them the envelope. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the moment everything changed. Mom's fingers tightened on the folder. Dad's jaw tensed. They looked up in unison, scanning the room, searching, but I was already gone. I had said what I needed to in that envelope. And now, I waited. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at David's place again. He offered, and I accepted, mostly because I didn't trust myself to be alone. I wasn't scared, not exactly, but I'd just taken a wrecking ball to my parents' carefully curated fantasy, and the fallout was inevitable. The next morning, I had 12 missed calls. 4 from Mom, 3 from Dad, 5 from Chloe. I didn't listen to the voicemails right away. I sat in David's guest room, still wearing the same clothes as yesterday, staring at my phone like it might explode. Finally, I pressed play. First message, from Mom, voice sharp and tight. "Nathan, what is this? What's going on? Why would you do something so cruel? We're your family." Second message, Dad this time. "I hope this is a joke. You don't know what you're messing with, son." Third, Chloe, sounding confused and more annoyed than anything else. "Okay, what did you do?" Mom's freaking out. "You better not have ruined anything for the baby, Nate." I deleted the rest. The truth was, I hadn't done anything illegal. Nothing even close. But I had exposed everything they worked so hard to hide. See, while I was being ignored and dismissed and told to figure it out, I'd been quietly keeping records. Bank statements, emails, text threads, everything. And it turned out my parents had been funneling money from my late grandfather's trust fund, which was originally set up for both of his grandchildren, Chloe and me. I only found out because David, being the kind of lawyer who actually reads the fine print, dug into it when I told him my parents had always claimed the trust barely had anything left after Chloe's college tuition and house down payment. But the fund hadn't been drained. It had been redirected. Illegally, Chloe had been getting quarterly deposits under a maintenance stipend. Mom and Dad had authorized it, with forged documents stating I'd forfeited my share years ago. Of course, I never signed anything, but they'd counted on me being too disconnected, too distracted, too exhausted to ever look into it. They were almost right. The envelope I handed the guard contained notarized statements from David, copies of the trust documents, and a notice of legal action. Civil fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and a formal motion to freeze the remaining assets until the case was resolved. By the time they'd opened the envelope, their accounts had already been flagged. And just like that, the perfect family image they'd been flaunting at gender reveals and Instagram brunches began to fracture. By Monday, I got another call. This time, I answered. "Hello, Nate." My father's voice was quieter now, like he was forcing calm. "We should talk. This has gone too far." I said nothing. He tried again. "Whatever this is, you've made your point. You're angry. We get it. But this? Dragging the whole family into court? That's not what Grandpa would have wanted." That made me laugh. A dry, bitter sound. "You're right," I said. He probably wouldn't have wanted his legacy stolen and funneled into Instagram sponsorships and fake eyelashes, either. There was silence on the other end. And then my dad's voice, lower now, colder. "You'll regret this." I hung up. For the next few weeks, things escalated. Chloe posted a now-deleted video crying about toxic family members who ruined everything out of jealousy. My mom sent me emails trying to guilt-trip me, talking about how I was tearing the family apart, how money shouldn't matter more than blood. But to me, it wasn't about money. It was about finally standing up, about no longer playing the role they had written for me in a story that always ended with Chloe on the pedestal and me on the floor, sweeping up after her. David filed the lawsuit, and when the court summoned them, they finally stopped calling. In the quiet that followed, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my grandfather's old friend, Harold. He was the executor before my parents managed to push him out of the loop, claiming I wanted nothing to do with the estate. I met him at a diner on the edge of town, just 2 coffee mugs between us and decades of silence. He told me things I never knew. That Grandpa had planned for me to take over his small business, that he'd even set aside a separate account for me to use when I turned 25, but it had somehow disappeared under my parents' care. By the time I left that diner, I had more than evidence. I had clarity. I'd spent my whole life trying to be the version of Nate they could tolerate. The quiet one. the helper, the afterthought. Now, I was something else entirely. And the next time I saw them, it wouldn't be at a birthday or a baby shower or another picture-perfect party with pastel decorations. It would be in court, front row. I'd be on the plaintiff's side, and they'd be sitting across from me, facing questions, consequences, and a judge who didn't care about gender reveals or family dinners. Just facts. And the truth. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, just in atmosphere. Everything felt sharp, echoey, unforgiving. The kind of place where excuses don't land and fake smiles die on arrival. I sat beside David at the plaintiff's table, in a navy suit he insisted I wear. First impressions matter, he'd said. You're not the angry kid in the corner anymore. You're the one holding the truth. I believed him, or I was trying to. Across the room, my parents looked smaller than I remembered. My mother wore a stiff cream blazer that probably cost more than my car. Her hair was perfectly curled, but her hands betrayed her, fidgeting, wringing the tissue in her lap to shreds. My dad sat stone-faced beside her, jaw tight, eyes flicking around like a man expecting a surprise ambush. Chloe wasn't there. David said their lawyer probably advised against it, which made sense. Chloe had no filter. She'd implode the second someone questioned her trust fund stipend. The judge entered. Gavel. Formalities. Then it began. David opened with calm, crisp precision. He laid everything out. The original terms of my grandfather's trust, the intended 50-50 split between Chloe and me, the forged documentation, the unauthorized withdrawals, the sequence of fraudulent transfers, and then the kicker. The recorded phone call between Harold and my mom from 5 years ago, where she joked about Nate never checking any of this stuff anyway. The courtroom didn't laugh. Their lawyer, a balding man in a tailored suit who looked like he should be selling yachts, tried to spin it. This is a family misunderstanding. The trust was always flexible. The parents were simply allocating resources based on need and involvement. Chloe was close to her grandfather. Nate, well, he was more distant. David leaned in slightly. Distant? He visited his grandfather every Sunday for 8 years. He helped manage the old man's prescriptions. He drove him to the hospital during his last fall. The room was still. The other lawyer muttered something about perception, but it was clear the narrative was shifting. Then it was time for witness statements. Harold went first. Steady, clear. He painted a picture of my grandfather, stern, proud, but deeply loyal. He loved both grandkids, Harold said, but he was always worried about Nate being overlooked. That's why he made things equal. He said, if anything happens to me, I don't want Nate to be at anyone's mercy. Then I was called. I didn't want to speak like a victim, so I didn't. I talked about what it felt like growing up invisible. About the time I broke my arm at 13 and had to wait 2 hours for someone to come get me from the ER because Chloe was getting her nails done with mom. About the night I graduated from trade school and no one showed up because they were at Chloe's boyfriend's album launch. About the gender reveal call from jail. My voice cracked there. Not from anger, but something deeper. The ache of being seen only when I'd become useful or threatening. The years I wasted trying to earn scraps of affection. The hollow feeling of realizing that blood ties mean nothing if you're just a background character in someone else's story. The judge didn't say much, but she nodded. Once. Slowly. When I stepped down, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face. Her eyes were glossy, but not from guilt, from fear. The next day, everything moved fast. David filed for an emergency injunction to freeze not just the remaining trust assets, but any joint marital accounts they used to fund Chloe's influencer lifestyle. Their lawyer objected, violently, said it was overreach, said I was trying to destroy their lives out of spite. David didn't even raise his voice. He just held up a printed sheet of Chloe's Instagram post from a year ago, where she wrote, "Shout out to my amazing parents for the housewarming gift. Yes, that's a Tesla?" With a photo of her posing in front of a Model Y. Gifted from my trust fund. The judge signed the freeze order. By the following week, their accounts were locked. Their lawyer tried to negotiate. He offered partial repayment. Apologies. Mediation. I refused. This wasn't about settling quietly. This was about telling the truth out loud. For once, in a room where everyone had to listen. Meanwhile, Chloe started to unravel. She posted a long-winded Instagram story claiming she was the victim of jealous male energy and how family money doesn't mean ownership. It backfired. Her sponsors dropped her within days. Turns out brands don't like being linked to financial fraud investigations. And my parents? They stopped showing up to court, started sending letters instead. First through their lawyer, then handwritten ones. Apologies. Regret. The classic, we didn't know how much we were hurting you. Followed by, you're punishing your own parents. Then eventually, we just want to talk. I didn't respond, because by then, I had something else to focus on. David had just informed me that the judge was considering a full transfer of control, naming me sole trustee of what was left of the estate. A chance not just to reclaim what was mine, but to decide what happens next. And just when I thought it couldn't get more surreal, just when things started settling into place, there was a knock at my apartment door one evening. I opened it, and there stood Chloe. No cameras, no ring lights, no filters, just her. And the first words out of her mouth were, "You don't have to ruin all of us." I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and let her in, because I needed to hear what came next. She stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside, arms crossed, jaw tight. The last time I'd seen Chloe in person, she'd been surrounded by pastel balloons and photographers, eating pink frosted cupcakes while I sat behind bars. Now she looked deflated. Not tired. No, tired can still be glamorous. She looked real. Makeup uneven, hair pulled back in a messy bun, hoodie hanging off one shoulder, and shadows under her eyes that not even her best concealer could hide. She glanced around my apartment like it was a foreign country. "This is where you live." I didn't bother answering. She already knew. She sat down stiffly on the edge of the couch, hands clasped together like she wasn't sure what to do with them. I stayed standing. "Look," she said finally. "I didn't come here to fight." "Good," I replied. "Because we're past that." Her lips twisted slightly. "Then what are we?" "Past fixing." I tilted my head. "We were never broken, Chloe. We just weren't the same story." She looked down, picking at her thumbnail. "Mom and Dad are losing it. They hired some crisis consultant. They're talking about selling the house, liquidating assets. Like everything. That's not my problem. But it is." Her voice cracked, and she caught herself, swallowing hard. "You think I knew? That I sat around cackling while they stole from you?" I raised an eyebrow. She hesitated. "Okay, I knew about the trust. But I thought you didn't care. You were always distant. Always off doing your own thing. HVAC, or whatever. You never wanted to be part of." "Part of what?" I interrupted. "The family? The lies? The brand?" She winced like I'd slapped her. I continued. "You think I wanted to be distant? You ever consider maybe I didn't have the luxury of being close? That maybe after being left behind enough times, you stop showing up for people who treat you like background noise?" She looked up at me, eyes shining. I didn't know how bad it was. "That's the problem," I said quietly. "You never had to." We sat there in silence. The only sound was the faint buzz of a faulty street lamp outside my window. Chloe finally spoke again, voice softer this time. "I didn't come here to beg or threaten. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I looked at her for a long time. The old Nate would have cracked, would have reached across the space between us and told her it was okay, that he forgave her. That family was more important. But I wasn't that Nate anymore. "I believe you," I said. "I believe you're sorry." She blinked. "You do? But that doesn't mean there aren't consequences." Her shoulders dropped, and she nodded slowly. "Are you going to go all the way with the case?" I paused. "It's not about revenge anymore, Chloe. It's about accountability. About truth. I'm not trying to destroy you. But I'm not going to protect the people who buried me either." She stood up. "Then I hope the judge sees it that way too." As she left, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like something that had been spinning inside me for years had finally gone quiet. The final hearing was 2 weeks later. The courtroom was more crowded this time. Reporters, extended family, a few curious strangers. The story had leaked. Local influencers' trust fund its center of legal battle. Chloe's name had trended on Twitter for a few hours. Her sponsorships were gone. The glow had dimmed. But she showed up, hair pulled back. No fake tears, no dramatics. Just silence. My parents sat beside her, each looking 10 years older. Their lawyer tried one final Hail Mary, arguing that I was destabilizing the family, dragging personal matters into public record. But the judge wasn't having it. In a calm, level tone, she read her verdict aloud. The court found clear evidence of financial mismanagement, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. Effective immediately, all control of the trust, both original and remaining assets, would be transferred to me. In addition, the court ordered my parents to repay the misused funds within 18 months or face asset seizure. Chloe was not required to pay anything, on the condition she had no future claim to the estate. I didn't look at her when the judgment was read. I only glanced once, when we were leaving. Our eyes met. She nodded. I nodded back. The weeks after felt surreal. Suddenly, I was being contacted by estate managers, accountants, even family members I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, inheriting money makes people remember your name. I ignored most of them. Instead, I did something different. I went back to Grandpa's workshop. It was still there, locked up behind the old house, rust on the hinges, but everything inside preserved like time had frozen. His tools, his blueprints, his thermos still sitting on the shelf. I spent that weekend cleaning it out. Then I called Harold. We reopened the business. Not HVAC, not trust fund consulting, just craft. My grandfather's original trade, woodworking, custom tables, chairs, restorations. I hired 2 of my old co-workers, brought them in on full pay with benefits, told them we'd make something real, something that lasted. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't chasing anything. Not approval, not recognition, just peace. My parents? They moved out of their house 3 months after the ruling, sold their car. The foreclosure notice came 2 weeks after that. I didn't gloat. I didn't show up. I didn't say a word, because they didn't call from jail. They didn't come to my graduation. They didn't ask if I was okay when I was locked in a holding cell, scared and alone. So I let them figure it out. Chloe moved to a smaller apartment, started a podcast of all things. Finding Balance, it was called. I listened to half an episode. She talked about rebuilding trust, accountability, mental health. Maybe it was all performative. Or maybe, just maybe, she was learning. I never reached out. But one day, she left a small package on my porch. No note, just a photo of Grandpa and me, taken when I was 10, sanding down an old table. On the back, she'd written, "He saw you, Nate, even when we didn't. I hope this helps you remember." It did. The workshop is full of life now. Every evening, I sit at the big cedar bench near the window, lights streaming in, tools lined up like soldiers ready for battle. And sometimes, when it's quiet, I hear his voice. My grandfather's. Rough but kind. "You did good, kid." And I smile. Because for the first time in forever, I believe it. Not because anyone else said it, but because I finally do.